I don't know if my message was read yesterday, says teacher from Texas, but I want to say the past 2 weeks I've taken my lunch right when the fun half starts, and y'all's coverage on Palestine has been great and helpful, especially since my students are beginning to ask some difficult questions. It's been a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's been a nightmare. I mean, obviously, it is. Ryan Grimm confirming, whatever it was, 45 names on that list does not mean that every name on that list is, is accurate. It's also quite possible that there are people who have not been found. When you have 1 million plus displaced internal refugees accounting for every dead person, when there's been more bombing in the course of a couple of days than we did in years in our conflicts. But the idea that there haven't been thousands of people killed in this bombing is absurd. The idea that civilians are killed on both sides, horrible. But what is the number? What is the number that is going to be achieved for the revenge that is going to take place to be satiated? That's the ongoing question. I mean, Hamas leadership is in Turkey, is in Qatar, is in other places. Hezbollah was born out of the 82 conflict. It is now 100,000 strong military. The idea that you can eliminate Hamas whole cloth is probably fantastical. Even if you could, the idea that you could eliminate a threat, that there would be no more threats to Israel, is also fantastical, because to do so means that you've killed thousands, if not tens of thousands, of civilians. And if you think that there is a justification for revenge and a desire for revenge by Israelis after that attack, and I certainly can understand the emotion, and understandable. I mean, it was a horrific slaughter.
Yeah.
But if you can understand that, then how can you also say simultaneously that you think going into Gaza and killing thousands of civilians en route, maybe tens of thousands of civilians en route into supposedly getting rid of Hamas, is not going to create the exact same emotion in the 1 million plus people left? I mean, it just doesn't make any rational sense. And I certainly understand why, the Israeli government might be acting irrationally. But the whole point of the American government's relationship with Israel is to, friends don't let their friends drive drunk type of situation.
Yeah. And the death from above that can rain down on innocent civilians is horrible, and also like you say, it does lead to a sort of defensive solidarity, and especially when you see people in the UK talking about this, you guys went through this with the Nazi bombing of London and the UK, that's where keep calm, carry on comes from. This is no way to deal. You can't bomb your way out of this.
No. And I will say there's also just a tremendous amount of misinformation out there in terms of what I've seen. People say, do you know that Brett Gelman, comedian.
Oh, comedian guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are people putting out like just the most ridiculous, bloodthirsty bullshit about this conflict. And it's, it is simply a fact that the Israeli government has full control over Gaza in terms of like its infrastructure and sort of these fundamental basic building blocks of life: electricity, water, power, water. You don't have the ability, if you are a Palestinian or a Palestinian government, to build your own water infrastructure because the Israelis won't let you. Don't have the ability to build a power plant because the Israelis will blow it up. That people will comment on this without knowing that basic fact, I find stunning. But let's talk about some good news. The National Labor Relations Board just came out with a ruling, or finalized a ruling, and I think we had talked about it some time ago. This was yesterday. They issued a final rule. Essentially, workers and unions are going to be able to hold companies liable for labor law violations by their franchisees and their contractors. And this has been a trend that's been going on for years here. The Obama administration had, under the Obama administration, a McDonald's became responsible for what people did, or I should say what management did to workers in a McDonald's restaurant. And I know that may sound obvious, but the relationship that McDonald's has with these McDonald's restaurants is their franchises. Now they sell them all the stuff. They tell them what they can offer or not offer. They tell them how to do their shifts and all of this stuff. But by being a franchisee or franchiser, they escaped a lot of labor laws and responsibility for poor labor practices by their franchises. They're no longer going to be able to do that under this National Labor Relations Board ruling. Also, you can't say, well, that's a contractor. I'm just hiring contractors. I'm not responsible for that. Amazon does that a lot. We've had a lot of calls about this, where Amazon drivers don't really work for Amazon. So this is going to have a big impact on the ability of workers to pursue labor violations and hold big companies accountable for this stuff. That's a big change. I mean, look, we've said this many times, but it bears repeating in the context of how horrible Biden has been, in my estimation, regarding Israel's actions in Gaza. You don't elect an individual president. As much as Donald Trump is reprehensible and this and that, what you're electing is think tanks and bureaucrats and ideologues and people who staff all these agencies, people who have developed relationships. You're electing like a network of relationships. And that network is forged by the support that these politicians have in various quarters. It may be helpful as a political matter to focus on the individual, because a lot of mid and low information voters, and sometimes a lot of high information voters, vote based upon just the personality or the personal attributes of the candidate. But understand, when you're electing a president, you're electing something far broader than that. And these things at the National Labor Relations Board are things simply you will not see with a Republican administration, regardless of who it is. Regardless. You won't necessarily see it with every Democratic administration either, frankly. But certainly labor has become far more prominent within the Democratic Party. I mean, by within the Democratic Party, I mean Democratic voters. That's also what you're electing, is sort of the broad consensus of the people that you are voting with. And this is good stuff coming out of the National Labor Relations Board. Leftist law Vigeland. Do you think that rule will extend to fast food chains mainly, or also to large restaurant management companies that oversee different kinds of restaurants? I don't know about that. Like a holding company, I'm not sure about that. King Cuck. I voted for Bernie based entirely on looks. Ja Leyu. Israel has cut off all telecommunications in Gaza and intensified their bombing. They're bombing from air and sea and have announced they're expanding ground operations. They're slaughtering Palestinians in the dark.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm seeing maybe some word that the ground invasion is, well, I guess we'll wait to see what the news says.
Vermont Ben. Bernie is too deferential to Biden. Also, Bernie is not committed to a 2024 re-election campaign. Is it true that end times comes when Sean Hannity gets waterboarded?
It'd be satisfying to watch Hannity put himself through that for, just to see how bad it is and if it's torture or not, like Hitchens did.